It was a typical Saturday morning. The house was quiet, with only the faint hum of the dishwasher in the background. Linda was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee, staring out the window. She hadn't said much all morning, which wasn't unusual. I figured she was just in one of her reflective moods. After 25 years of marriage, you get used to these things, knowing when to talk and when to give space. But there was something different about today. The air felt heavier. I could feel it when I walked into the room, like there was something unsaid hanging between us. I grabbed my coffee, sat across from her, and finally broke the silence. "You all right?" I asked, trying to read her expression. Her fingers were gently tracing the rim of her mug, and she still hadn't looked at me. Linda took a long breath and set her mug down, finally meeting my eyes. There was a sadness there that I hadn't noticed before. Not a fleeting sadness, but something deeper, something that had been growing for a while. "Mark, we need to talk," she said softly, her voice trembling just enough for me to notice. The words sent a chill down my spine. No one ever says we need to talk without something serious to follow. I straightened up, suddenly more alert. "All right, let's talk," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I was bracing myself for what was coming, though I had no idea what it would be. She looked down at her hands, her fingers nervously twisting her wedding ring around her finger. "I've been thinking about us, a lot." I stayed quiet, my stomach tightening as I watched her gather the courage to say whatever it was she had rehearsed in her head. I could feel the distance between us, even though we were sitting just a few feet apart. It was like I was watching her drift away in real time. "I think..." She paused again, swallowing hard. "I think we need to separate." There it was. The words hung in the air, freezing the moment in place. I stared at her, trying to process what she had just said. Separate? After 25 years of marriage, of building a life together, of raising kids and making plans for the future, she wanted to separate? I blinked, trying to mask the disbelief. "Separate?" I echoed, my voice quieter than I intended. "What are you talking about, Linda?" she sighed, running a hand through her hair in frustration. "I don't know if this is working anymore." "Us?" "I mean, we've been going through the motions for years, Mark. You must feel it too." I did feel it. We'd been stuck in a routine, sure, but that's what happens after a long marriage, doesn't it? Things become comfortable, predictable. I didn't think that meant it was broken. "I thought we were fine," I said, my words hesitant, searching her face for some kind of reassurance. "I didn't know you were unhappy." Her eyes softened for a moment, and she reached across the table, her fingers brushing against mine. "It's not that I'm unhappy. It's just..." She trailed off, looking for the right words. "I feel like I need something more. Like I've lost a part of myself, and I need to figure out who I am again." "By separating?" I asked, pulling my hand back. The bitterness in my tone surprised even me. She nodded slowly, as if she was still trying to convince herself. "Maybe divorce. I'm not sure yet." That was the moment it hit me. She wasn't just thinking about space, she was considering ending it all. The life we built, the history we shared, all of it could be thrown away because she needed to find herself. A mix of emotions surged through me: anger, confusion, disbelief. But instead of lashing out, something inside me hardened. I wasn't going to beg or plead. I wasn't going to sit there and try to fix something that was already crumbling in her mind. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "Okay," I said firmly. Linda's eyes widened in surprise. "Okay? Yeah, okay," I repeated, feeling strangely calm. "You want a separation? Fine. I'll pack my things." She blinked, clearly not expecting me to agree so quickly. "Wait, Mark, I didn't mean..." I stood up, pushing my chair back as I moved toward the bedroom. "No, you meant it. You've been thinking about this for a while, haven't you? You don't just drop a bomb like that out of nowhere. Mark, can we at least talk about this?" She called after me, her voice a mix of panic and regret. I stopped at the bedroom door, turning to face her. "What's there to talk about? You've made up your mind. I'm just making it easier for you." She stood up from the table, walking toward me with a pleading look in her eyes. "I don't want this to be rushed. I just need time to figure things out. We can still what?" play house while you decide if you want to leave me or not. I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. No, Linda. You wanted space? You got it. She reached for my hand, but I stepped back, keeping the distance between us. If you cheat, Linda, I said, my voice cold and deliberate, there will be consequences. Don't think you can just test the waters and everything will be fine. Her face paled at my words, and for the first time that morning, I saw real fear in her eyes. Mark, but I didn't let her finish. I grabbed my suitcase from the closet, stuffing clothes into it without care. I could hear her standing in the hallway, watching, maybe waiting for me to change my mind. But I wasn't going to. Minutes later, I was at the front door, my bag slung over my shoulder. I turned one last time to face her. Good luck with whatever it is you're trying to find, Linda, I said, my voice filled with finality. Her eyes glistened with tears, but I didn't wait for her to respond. I closed the door behind me, leaving behind 25 years of marriage with one final echo of our past life together. As I walked to my car, a strange mix of emotions hit me. Anger, sadness, relief. She had wanted space, and now she had all the space in the world. But I couldn't help but wonder, who would fill that space first? I drove away from our home with a storm of emotions swirling inside me. The house loomed in my rearview mirror, a monument to the life I had built with Linda, now shadowed by the enormity of her announcement. I needed to find a new normal, and I had no idea what that looked like. Samantha's apartment wasn't far from my office, a comfortable, modern space that seemed to embody the vibrant energy she brought into my life. It had always been easy to joke and flirt with her at work, but now, it felt like an escape hatch from the life I had just walked away from. As I pulled into her parking lot, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. I knocked on the door, and it opened almost immediately. Samantha stood there, her expression brightening when she saw me. Hey! You made it, she said, her voice a lilting melody that felt like balm for my frayed nerves. Yeah, I kind of needed to, I admitted, forcing a smile as I stepped inside. The scent of cinnamon and vanilla filled the air, instantly calming me. Want a drink? She asked, walking toward the kitchen. I've got wine, beer, or something stronger if you're feeling adventurous, I chuckled, shaking my head. Let's start with the wine. I might need a drink to drown my thoughts for a bit. Samantha poured 2 glasses and handed one to me, raising her glass with a teasing smile. To new beginnings? Cheers, I replied, clinking my glass against hers, though the gesture felt hollow. I took a sip, letting the familiar flavor wash over me, but it did little to ease the knot in my stomach. Want to talk about it? She asked, her tone shifting to something more serious as she leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Not really, I said, my voice coming out more curt than I intended. I mean, it's just, everything is so fresh right now. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it all. Samantha nodded, her eyes understanding. I get it. Just know I'm here for you, whatever you need. Thanks, I murmured, grateful for her support but feeling the weight of my decisions. I didn't want to lean too much on her. It felt wrong, considering the circumstances. We chatted about work, the usual light-hearted topics that we used to share, but the conversation always felt like it was dancing around the real issue. I could sense Samantha wanted to ask more, to dig deeper, but she respected my silence for now. As the evening wore on, the wine dulled the ache of my reality. Samantha laughed at my jokes, her laughter ringing through the apartment, filling the empty spaces where I had left my past life behind. Eventually, we ended up on the couch, the comfortable distance between us slowly evaporating as we shared stories and insights into our lives. You know, she said after a particularly amusing anecdote about a disastrous company party, I've always admired how you handle things. You take everything in stride. I don't think I could handle what you're going through, I sighed, setting my glass down. It's not as easy as it looks. I've spent the last few decades building a life, and now it feels like it's all crumbling around me. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this. Samantha turned to me, her expression softening. You are strong, Mark. You're just facing something that's incredibly hard. But you're not alone. You've got people who care about you. I met her gaze, feeling the sincerity in her words. Yeah, I appreciate that. It means a lot to hear it from you. And then, as if the tension of the day had built up to this moment, she leaned closer, her eyes searching mine. I know this is a confusing time for you, but if you ever need more than just a friend, I'm here. Her words hung in the air between us, charged with an intimacy that felt both inviting and dangerous. My heart raced. I was acutely aware of the situation. I had just left my wife, and here was Samantha, offering me an escape and a distraction. I don't know if I'm ready for that, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Samantha nodded, her expression shifting slightly as she pulled back, giving me space. I understand. Just know I'm here for you, whatever you need. No pressure, but it was too late to pretend there wasn't an undeniable connection between us, a flicker of something that had been ignited by my turmoil. Just as the atmosphere grew thicker, my phone buzzed on the coffee table, shattering the moment. I reached for it, my heart sinking when I saw Linda's name flashing on the screen. I hesitated before answering, the weight of my past crashing down on me. Hello? I said, bracing myself. Mark, where are you? Linda's voice was sharp, almost accusatory. I'm at a friend's place, I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. Your friend's place? She repeated, her incredulity evident. You left so fast. I didn't expect you to run off to someone else. Someone else? Linda, you're the one who asked for space. You can't just throw accusations at me. I shot back, the tension of the last few hours bubbling to the surface. I didn't mean to imply. She started, but I cut her off. I don't want to discuss this now. You made your choice. I felt a surge of anger and hurt flood through me. You want to separate? Fine. But don't act like I'm the one who's doing something wrong. I could hear her take a deep breath, the hurt in her voice now replaced by something softer. I'm just trying to understand, Mark. This is all so sudden for me, too. Then you should have thought about that before you brought it up, I replied, my heart pounding. I need to go. I hung up before she could respond, feeling a mix of relief and guilt. I had been holding on to the hope that maybe we could work things out, but I was quickly realizing that hope was slipping through my fingers. Samantha looked at me, concern etched across her face. Are you okay? I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling heavily. No, I'm not okay. I just need to get through this. Do you want to talk about it? She asked gently, her voice soothing. I shook my head, feeling a lump form in my throat. Not right now. I just need some time to process everything. Samantha nodded, respect shining in her eyes. I understand. Just know I'm here for you. As we settled back into a comfortable silence, I felt the weight of my choices pressing down on me. The walls of my old life were closing in, and I had no idea what the future held. But one thing was clear, I was on a new path now, and there was no turning back. The first week of my new life passed in a blur of confusion and overwhelming emotions. Living at Samantha's apartment was both a refuge and a reminder of the chaos I had left behind. Every morning, I awoke to the sound of city life bustling outside the window, a sharp contrast to the quiet suburban mornings I had known for so long. I could almost convince myself that everything would be alright if I didn't think too hard about it. One evening, after a long day at work, I found myself sitting on the couch with Samantha, the weight of my emotions feeling a bit lighter as we watched a movie. But even the light-hearted antics of the film couldn't drown out the nagging thoughts in my mind. I glanced over at Samantha, her eyes sparkling with laughter, but all I could think about was Linda. Do you think you'll talk to Linda again soon? Samantha asked, her voice breaking through my fog. I shrugged, taking a sip from my glass of wine. I don't know. I mean, I don't even know how to have a conversation with her right now. Every time I think about it, I just get angry. Understandable, she said softly, her gaze thoughtful. But you've been married for 25 years. You should at least try to find closure, don't you think? Closure? I scoffed, setting my glass down. What does that even mean? She wants a separation. She can have it. I'm just trying to survive this. Samantha frowned, leaning closer. Mark, I know it's hard, but you need to face it. Avoiding it won't help you move on. Her words hung in the air, striking a chord deep inside me. I didn't want to admit it, but she was right. The longer I avoided the conversation with Linda, the more the situation festered in my mind, clouding my judgment and pushing me toward decisions I wasn't ready to make. Maybe you're right, I finally conceded. I just feel so lost. Everything is different now. Change is hard, Samantha said gently, her hand resting on my arm. But it can also lead to something new and beautiful if you let it. I nodded slowly, feeling the warmth of her touch but also the weight of guilt pressing down on me. I didn't want to explore anything new, I just wanted to find my footing again. The next few days dragged on. I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept wandering to Linda and the state of our marriage. I could still picture the look on her face when I walked out, a mix of confusion and pain that tugged at my conscience. Finally, on a Friday afternoon, I made up my mind. I needed to confront this head on. I grabbed my phone and typed out a message to Linda, my fingers trembling as I hit send. "Can we talk?" The response came quickly, an almost immediate wave of relief mixed with anxiety. "Sure." "Where?" "How about our old coffee shop?" "Okay. See you there." When the time came, I parked outside the quaint little cafe that had been a regular spot for us during our early years of marriage. As I stepped inside, I was hit by a flood of nostalgia. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods filled the air, and I felt a pang of longing for the days when things felt simpler. Linda was already seated at a table in the corner, her expression unreadable as I approached. She looked different, more vulnerable than I remembered, yet still somehow defiant. "Hey," I said, sliding into the chair across from her. "Hey," she replied softly, avoiding eye contact as she played with the edge of her napkin. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our history settling between us. I could sense the tension, the unspoken words that hung in the air like a dense fog. "I wanted to talk about what happened," I finally said, breaking the silence. "About the separation." She nodded slowly, still not meeting my gaze. "I've been thinking about it too. It was a huge decision, Mark. I didn't take it lightly." "I know," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "But we need to figure out what this means for us." She finally looked up, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of sorrow and determination. "I didn't mean for it to escalate this way. I just felt lost. Like I was living a life that wasn't my own." "I get that," I admitted. "But we could have talked about it. I thought we were a team." "We used to be," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "But somewhere along the line, I felt like I was losing myself. I wanted to find that person again, and I thought separation was the way to do it." "But what about us?" I pressed, frustration creeping into my tone. "What about everything we built together?" Linda sighed, looking away again. "I know it seems selfish, but I didn't want to cheat or betray you. I thought maybe some time apart would clarify things. But now I see how wrong I was." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of her words. "And what about now? Where does that leave us?" Her eyes glistened with tears, and for a moment, I could see the hurt we both carried. "I don't know, Mark. I want to work on us, but I need you to understand that I need to find my own way too. I don't want to lose myself completely." "I don't want that either," I replied, my voice softer. "But it feels like we're both lost. Can we navigate this together?" She nodded slowly, a flicker of hope igniting in her eyes. "Yes, I'd like that. I want to be honest with you, to try to rebuild what we had." "Then let's start with honesty," I said, feeling a small sense of relief wash over me. "Let's talk about everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly." As we shared our thoughts and fears, I realized how much we had both been holding back. It was a long and painful conversation, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe we could find our way back to each other, but it would take time, patience, and most importantly, commitment from both of us. We spent the next hour unraveling the threads of our marriage, each revelation bringing us closer to understanding what had gone wrong. It was raw and emotional, but through it all, I felt a connection rekindle, a spark that hinted at the possibility of healing. As we finally finished our coffee, I reached across the table and took her hand. "I know we have a long way to go, but I'm willing to put in the effort." "Are you?" Linda smiled through her tears, squeezing my hand tightly. "Yes, I am. I want to fight for us, Mark." In that moment, I felt the weight of the past begin to lift, replaced by the tentative hope of a new beginning. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time since the separation, I believed we could find our way back to each other. And that realization was a light in the darkness. The days that followed our conversation in the cafe were filled with a mixture of cautious optimism and underlying anxiety. Linda and I had agreed to work on our marriage, but I quickly learned that the process of rebuilding trust wasn't going to be as easy as I had hoped. The echoes of betrayal still lingered, and both of us carried the weight of our past decisions like heavy stones in our pockets. One Saturday morning, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table in our home, which still felt strangely foreign after my brief time away. The sunlight streamed in through the windows, casting warm rays on the breakfast spread I had prepared: pancakes, fresh fruit, and coffee. I wanted this to be a fresh start, a signal that I was willing to put in the effort to reconnect. When Linda walked in, she paused at the doorway, taking in the scene. Her expression was unreadable, a mixture of surprise and apprehension. "Wow, this looks amazing," she said, a hint of a smile breaking through her uncertainty. "Just thought I'd try to make it special," I replied, trying to keep my voice light despite the heaviness in my chest. "I figured we could start with breakfast and talk about some ground rules for us moving forward." She nodded slowly, her smile fading slightly as she took a seat at the table. "That sounds good. I think we need that." We began eating in silence, the tension palpable. After a few moments, I set my fork down and cleared my throat. "So, I've been thinking about what we discussed at the cafe, about how we need to rebuild our trust." "Yeah," she replied, looking down at her plate. "It won't be easy, will it?" "Not at all," I admitted. "I know that trust isn't something that can be rebuilt overnight. We'll need to be open with each other and take things slow. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Linda looked up, her eyes searching mine. "What if I mess up again? What if I fall back into old patterns?" "Then we address it," I said firmly. "We can't be afraid to communicate, even when it's hard. If we want this to work, we need to be honest, no matter how uncomfortable it gets." She took a deep breath, nodding slowly. "I want that too. I really do. I want us to be better." "Good," I said, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. "Maybe we can start by sharing our expectations. What do you think we need to feel safe in this process?" Linda paused, her brow furrowing in thought. "I think we need to set boundaries. I don't want either of us to feel tempted to stray again. We need to communicate our needs and feelings, even if it's tough." "Agreed," I replied, leaning forward. "Let's also check in with each other regularly. Maybe a weekly dinner where we talk about how we're feeling, no distractions. Just us." "I like that idea," she said, a small smile returning to her face. "And I promise to be honest with you, even when it's hard. I want to be that person for you again." As we finished breakfast, I felt a sense of hope budding between us, but I knew that it was just the first step in a long journey. I had to remain vigilant, not just for myself but for both of us. Later that day, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. As I strolled through our neighborhood, memories of our life together flooded back: lazy Sunday mornings, walks in the park, and the simple pleasure of being with each other. It was bittersweet, and it drove home the fact that we had lost so much. I returned home to find Linda sitting in the living room, flipping through an old photo album. She looked up as I entered, a wistful expression on her face. "I was just looking at some of these old pictures. Do you remember this?" She held up a photo of us from a camping trip, both of us grinning widely as we posed in front of a tent. I laughed, a warm feeling swelling in my chest. "Of course. That trip was a disaster. We got lost, and we almost ran out of food, but we survived," she said, her voice turning serious. "And we had some great memories despite everything. I think we can do that again." I nodded, feeling the warmth of her words wrap around me. "I hope so. It's going to take time, but I believe we can find that joy again." That evening, as we settled into the couch to watch a movie, the conversation drifted to lighter topics. It was nice to share laughter and remember the things that had drawn us together in the first place. But deep down, I knew that the real work was still ahead of us. "Hey, can I ask you something?" I said after a moment of silence. Sure, Linda replied, turning to face me, her expression open and curious. Do you still trust me? I asked, my heart racing. I mean, after everything that's happened, Linda hesitated, biting her lip. I want to, Mark. But I'm still working on it. I've been hurt, and it's going to take time to heal. I'm not there yet, I understand, I said, feeling the weight of her honesty. And I'm willing to wait. I'll do everything I can to show you that I'm committed to us. Her eyes softened, and she nodded. Thank you for saying that. It means a lot to me. Let's take this one day at a time, I suggested. And if we ever feel ourselves slipping back into old habits, we need to call it out immediately. Agreed, she replied, a small smile breaking through her serious demeanor. I want to feel safe with you again, and I want you to feel safe with me too. As we settled into a comfortable silence, I felt the slightest flicker of hope in my chest. We were both wounded, but we were willing to fight for each other. It wouldn't be easy, and there would undoubtedly be setbacks along the way, but I finally believed we could navigate this together. That night, as we drifted off to sleep, I felt the warmth of her presence beside me. It was a reminder that while we had faced our darkest moments, there was still a light between us, a light worth fighting for. And with that realization, I knew we were on the right path, even if the journey ahead was filled with uncertainty.